Okay, now this time we have already moved to the last part. Since the previous two parts, they are mainly focused on using the box cutter and hot ops to make the whole SifiGun. The last part is just the materials. As the start of it, since we can see that I have already add a preset for it because I have already installed an add-on. This is just the procedure material, and you can just download it from the Blend Market. But the second one is the material, the Fluent Materializer. This is the second add-on that we're just going to use it for today. So at the beginning of it, as we can see that I just use preset asset from the real-time materials. This is just a metal, and the name is the distorted metal. So which means that we can use a combination between the already made preset by the order and with a combination from the material Fluent Materializer, so we can just create the complex one that which also can boost our speed, that we do not need to get everything started from the very initial moment from the zero. So as we can see that when I have already add distorted metal for it, and I also move to the shading editor and add edges for this part. As we can see that we just directly go to activate the Fluent Materializer and press F and choose edges, or just choose all edges, which means that we can add bevel for the materials. So when we just the third atom we also need to activate is just the node wrangler, which means that if you just press both Ctrl and Shift and click that node, it will just automatically connect to the viewer, which is pretty handy. So now from this part, I just use the edge and create a mixer shader to mix the already created the distorted metal and the edge mask together, so we can clearly see that I want to make these distorted edges to be much smooth, and actually, which means that in real life, those distorted parts actually will just be the pure metal being reflected from the button. So which means that it will just be much glossy and shiny than the stained metal on its surface. So as we can see from that. Another problem is I want to say that if we just use the Blender 4.0 and install the Fluent Materializer, as we can see, if I used the scratch, there will also be some bugs in the add-on. So which means that not all the node will just be perfect. There will just be some undefined node in that node groups. So one problem is you can just choose another one to take place of the previous one if there will be some buggings, if there are some bugs inside. Or another method is you can just also expand a node group and fix it on our own. So I can just fix it later, but now as a start of it, I think I just use the replacement for those buggy node groups, and just try to, we can also expand it and find that if there won't be any red node groups, or if there won't be any undefined node groups, it will just be useful. So maybe you will just feel that it is a little bit complicated, but actually it is not so complicated as you think, since all the steps I'm doing now actually just try to add some mask for it. You can also use the lighten that has already been provided by the Fluent Materializer and add the scratches and the bevel edge together, so that as we can see that there will be both the scratched edges and the scratches being added together. So it is only a mask with the black and white. Internet accessing is I just go to the real-time material and find basic plastic for the main part of this handle of that SifiGun. So in order to make it become pretty simple, I just directly add basic plastic. Since if you expand in the group, you can find that actually there are a lot of bumps and noisy images being added in that. So as we can find that the socket was just being connected to the bump node, which means that it may seems to be looks like the bumped plastic, right? As we can see that I just increased the bump scale to more than 400, which means that actually the dots will just be small enough, which may looks like to be the real plastic, right? And the next thing I also go to the fluent materializer and add a puddle for that, which means maybe the puddle is really not a very good node for that, but actually what I want to do is just to connect the socket to its roughness. So which may seems that some part of these plastics actually will just be sticked with some water or being sticked with some imperfection from our fingers. It is just a little bit wet and not so dry on its whole surface. So as we can see that we can also change its mask from black and white, or also we can just add invert color. So which means that the black actually is just a total glossy and the white is just not glossy at all, as we can see. And then the next step is I also go to Fluent Materializer and add all edges for net. Since we can see the differences between the all edges and the edges, actually the edge set by the Fluent Materializer is actually based on the ambient inclusion. So which means that the edge mask could be seen under EV engine, while all edges could only be seen under Cycles engines, but not in EV edges. So these are the differences, and actually the performance from all edges will just be a little bit better than the performance from the ambient occlusion. So that's the difference between it. So if we want to get everything being rendered in Cycles, I suggest you use all edge instead of using edge alone. Okay, the next thing I think is we can directly add a ground, and got it being connected to the all edges texture socket directly. So which means that the edges will just be added with more details, and it looks to be more realistic, and it will not be totally just a very clear line on it, which just looks pretty fake and unrealistic. And I'll also add a musgrave texture and got them being connected together to the edge. So some part of it will just be scratched and some part won't be. And so that's the purpose what I want to make it like that. And in order to reduce the burden from the performance, I just simply add a diffuse BSDF, not the principal BSDF. And I do not want to make the node become too complicated, actually. What I need to do is just try to make the node as simple as possible, but it can just reach the effect we want, so it will just be the perfect one, rather than those actually what seems to be a very normal performance, but actually a very heavy burden, and the node groups looks to be extremely complicated. It seems to be that the author will just be very great guy in making the nodes, and looks to be terrified and horrible to describe that how awesome, how boastful the person is. Actually, this is not what I want to make. Our final purpose is just make the performance looks to be great, and also the final turnout is also great with the simplest node connection. Is actually a very great idea. Since we all know that if we have already added too many node groups for the real-time materials, for the procedural materials, it will also create a lot of burdens for our laptops. For some of the persons whose computer is not very good on his outfit, I really do not suggest you to do like that. So as we can see, and this part I also add a gradient movement, the gradient texture from the fluent materializer, and I adjust its wave amount, its z-axis, texture strength, and the fineness, and also its strength to for those socket and sliders has already been provided by the author to make it looks like that from up to button kind of gradient mask, a gradient mask provided for this. And the next thing is I also want to add some dust for the plastic. So I copy that basic plastic and change its color to the dust color and add a mix shader, got them being connected, and use the mask to define which part will just be black and which part will just be the olive color. And then I just adjust their strands and make their color become looks to be much closer to each other, and I do not want to make it looks to be too thick. So the next thing I also want to add some bump noise textures could also be displayed on the mud textures. So I changed its mix the position between the mix shader and I got them being connected together so that as we can see for now, right? Well, as for this part, I also just changed the strength from its noise bump, and if we just move it closer, you can see the difference on it. And some people may also say that why don't you just install another add-on called the node preview? Yeah, actually, there will just be a very small squared texture being displayed on the top of each node, which can instantly give a very fast preview about the textures, just like the systems designer. That is just great, but as there are also some disadvantage if you use the node viewer, since the image is really too small being displayed on the top of each those node. And another problem is that if we just got a very slight change, especially for those part and areas where the details are extremely tiny, it could not be fully displayed on the node preview. So that's the reason. So it only depends on you whether you can just install it or not, but which means that you also have to expand the space between all of those nodes if you just activate the node preview on the top of each of those nodes, right? So this time I just directly used the node wrangler and I got every part being displayed by press Ctrl and Shift and single click that node, got them being connected to the viewer, so we can just see the details more clearly. It is really more visible and advisable than simply got them being viewed on the node viewer on node preview. Oh, that's just it. So after we have added some dust from top to bottom, that's the gradient textures, and I also select the rest of the part of those SifiGun and press Ctrl and L, choose link materials from the previous part, so they will just easily move the previous node to the new part. But as for this part, I just becoming too lazy to change the axis from those gradient textures, since we can see that actually for a different part maybe their direction are totally different. So the gradient axis or the gradient direction or may also be changed. So it depends on if, since as you can see that from this one, it just totally turns from left to right, but not from top to bottom. Whatever, it depends on you if you want to got them being unified or not. But I think that actually from the current view, the differences are just not so clearly, and they do not look to be so fake. So I do not want to change the direction here right now, right? Since we can also find that the edge bevel could also be convenient from the previous one to the new one. So you just changed the bevel distance to see for now. The next part is I also choose a camo from the procedural materials and drag it directly to this up part of this SifiGun, and I just change its detail scale and the pattern scale. I also press tab to expand it to see the consisting of that camo node. Actually, it is not so complicated as you can see that. If you are familiar with that, they are not so complicated mathematic nodes being added inside it. So everything are just being based on the original textures that being provided by the Blender. So there won't be anything difficult for that for us to make it being understood, right? So I want to change its color ramp to make the camo looks to be darker, and as for those cloud textures, I also want to make more gray color inside it, and do not make the color looks to be too colorful. So that's just it. If we just look into the camo node groups, we can also adjust its bump strands to make the bump looks to be more like the plastic, and we can also make the roughness scales to be even larger. The number become larger, so those shining parts will just looks to be much smaller under the camera if we the light directly force on it, so it will not be looks to be too big on it. And also add another mask group textures to got it being connected to the bump, so which you can see that we just change its light. They may looks to be smaller and more realistic. So that's just it, right? Okay, the next thing is I also want to add an all edge for this area, and also add a diffuse BSDF to add the edge scratch for it, right? So this will just be the most basic operation for the process in making the fluent materializer and other your self-custom nodes. So that is just a difference. Some people may also ask that why don't you just directly create a principal BSDF in advance and then click that got that node being selected and press F to add 2 layers or 3 layers, since the fluent materializer will automatically add multiple layers together to as for the preset of those different shaders and masks, right? That's just it, but I don't think I want to make the node become too complicated, since actually the final result is just the same. So why don't we just make it more controllable and do everything on our own with the assistance of those fluent materializers, and make those BSDF become simpler, right? So that is just it. So add an all edge and a diffuse BSDF to make the scratched edges looks to be lighter, since the color also need to be lighter. In accessing that, actually, as you can see that those scratched edges actually will just be lower than the overall part of this camel cutter, which means that some areas actually has some bump vibrations from it. So the next jobs I also want to do is actually add a bump from it. As we can see, I just choose a bump and I just got it being connected to the diffuse BSDF, that cutter, and move the strands to a little bit lower